Well, it's another beautiful day as God has given us out here. We're halfway through October, and I'll tell you what, air is beautiful. And I look at these leaves turning. It is a beautiful thing that the Lord gave us. Watch these seasonal things take place with the leaves on the trees. In the fall, how they turn and go into orange and yellow, and then they come back in the spring from bare branches. Yes, sir. God is good. If it wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here. I got a story about that. I'll tell you about it sometime if you want to hear it. 'Cause, I almost didn't make it. Doctors gave me no hope, and God brought me through that storm. I was praying to Jesus and saying, God, please, in your son's name, Jesus, heal me. I was watching my vital signs drop off in the hospital. My blood cells were eating each other. Scary situation. But I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about you guys. And one thing I can do here is that I can take a minute to tell you, I try to help you fellas out with performance stuff. The most important thing I could ever tell you is that without God, we are nothing. He's brought me through the storm many times. I feel sorry for people that don't believe like that, because there's really no reason not to, except to be deceived by Satan. That's my opinion about that, because it's easier to believe in God than it is not to, in my opinion. But so much for the preaching. I just like to help. I know how God's got me through the storm, and some people don't have that in their life, and I see them try to cope with situations, and some people don't cope too well. I wouldn't if it wasn't for God. I'll tell you that right now. So that's the least I could do, is give you a little bit of inspiration there of what God does in my life. He gets me through a lot of bad situations. We see happy-go-lucky people on YouTube, and sometimes their everyday life, there's things that happen behind the scenes that we don't even know about. If you don't believe me, some of these TikTok people have had some very tragic things happen lately where they're unhappy, and it's terrible. They don't have the Lord in their life because they can get through them situations. That's why we're told to take one day at a time. I've had to teach myself that instead of worrying about tomorrow, bills and stuff like that. So my point was, if I can tell you guys about performance and take the time thinking I'm helping somebody with that, and I have something like the Lord in my life, it feels like it helps me. That's the most important thing I could possibly tell somebody, in my opinion. I remember a guy back in the day, he had friends and they knew about the Lord, and some were Christians and some just knew about God. And they said one day to the guy something about one of his problems. He said, well, how come you guys never told me about Jesus? He found Jesus on, I don't know, TV or went to church or something. And he was upset with them guys because here he had all these friends and they never shared that with him. So I'm sharing at least what I think in my mind and what gets me through and in my life. Many times, prayer. When you have faith, it's amazing what God will say and will do for you. Because He'll lead you and guide you if you ask Him to. He doesn't say we have to be anything but faithful when it comes to answering our prayers. Do you know that? Because I'm not the best living person. I have ways about me that are just like anybody else. Temper. Sometimes everyday life gets in my way, and there's things I don't always handle the way that I should. But the Lord gets me through, and like I started to say, if I can tell you guys horsepower tips and things that help me in life, I'm going to share it. What you do with it is up to you, but it's up to me to at least share something when I think it might help somebody. I always said when I started this channel, if I could help one person with anything, then that's what I accomplished what I started out to do. So anyway, we're going to jump off the sermon here. My everyday life sermon. To these E7s, we're going to discuss something here. As soon as this music goes by here, this is a big noise here I got going on here that happens every time I get on YouTube. I waited for the hammering to stop over here, and then I got that. And that, I can't even hear what I'm saying to you guys when that kind of stuff goes by. So anyway, let's get back to this. I wanted to show you guys what I'm doing here. I'm taking a piece of sandpaper and I'm going by your guide here, and I'm smoothing that out because I don't know if you can see it, there's a low spot. And what we're going to do, we're going to blend in where it has a deep trench, not so deep, but it's a trench, it's a low spot, where I went in there with the carbide bit. Now, as I tell you fellas, I try to blend that as I go, but you're still going to wind up with certain areas that are a little bit deeper than you want, and because you're dealing with casting that's thicker in one area than it's thinner in others. So when I'm doing these kind of areas, I'll just concentrate on the area, and sometimes you'll wind up with a little trench even though you're trying to blend it in as you go. So, and that would be a dead spot for air, and we have to always remember our fuel is mixed in with the intake side of things. So we're going to show you the difference here. The dark area will probably show up more than the trench will rubbing it, because it turns it more of a chrome polish using this lighter grit sandpaper. Just like a probably a 80 grit or a 120 by the time it's worn out. But anyway, if you take your finger in here, you can feel the trench. Not so much here because I've been working on this, but you can still feel it a little bit. But it's pretty deep here. So I hope you can see that. Try to turn the head a little bit. So regardless if you see it or not here on my viewfinder, all you have to do whenever you pour something is put your finger in there and see if you can feel a dip or a trench, and then you just want to blend it in or taper it in, as I say most of the time, any way you can with whatever you want to use. But I find it's best to use your fingers whenever you're trying to get something out in an area like this here, because you can feel as you do it if it's smoothing out. I'll get this out one of these days, guys. And it's not so much smooth, it's just the transition you're going for. And another thing I do here is I blend this into the bowl area. And another word I use is contour. And if you think about it this way, the air is coming off the sidewall and going straight back into the bow area. And this is the poor side of the head where it dips down. This isn't the long wall, this is the poor side that they call as far as airflow. And I think everything needs to be blended and smooth whenever it has a transition. When it comes to making power, some guys think some things aren't no real big deal, and I'm sure there's people that have heads done that have left them like this here and they run perfectly fine maybe, but I'd rather have this all one nice area. Why do half the work right and then leave it where you're leaving horsepower on the table, or even if you're not leaving any horsepower on the table, would you like that hanging over your head after you put hours and hours in on doing something like a pair of cylinder heads? Well, I don't. Sometimes we do things that's a peace of mind that makes sense to us, and you won't see any horsepower gain out of it, but how do you know sometimes what works and what doesn't work? Flow benches don't tell you everything, and you have to know how a vehicle should run with the work you've done. If it's really killing the head off or helping you out for power whenever you do something. But something that just takes a few minutes, like this here, or, well, even if it takes you a day, it's peace of mind. It looks nicer. Not that I care about looks, but I'm sure this helps the flow out. And what makes me come to that conclusion is that when you have a 10-second vehicle with a pair of this factory casting heads on it, and it runs pretty decent and makes enough power to go 10s, and a little bit of spray going in the 9s, so you may be on to something. Even if the car goes 11s and you're trying to go 11s in the quarter mile, a lot of times I talk on the quarter mile side of things because I am still getting used to 8th mile stuff. Yeah, we grew up in the quarter mile tracks here, and I've had to basically try to learn myself about the 8th mile stuff, because 8th mile to me has always been like a 50-foot race when you race your friend 50 feet. Or actually, better yet, we had the 50-yard dash in school, and that was where you just ran as hard as you could in 50 yards, and they would put a little stopwatch out there and clock you. I did pretty good on that. But anyway, the quarter mile has always been my thing, and when I speak, I forget sometimes that I'm talking to guys that go 8th mile. And if I was to tell you a 10-second car in the 8th mile, you wouldn't need to watch me for any information, I'll tell you that. Unless it was a 4-cylinder car that made about 60 horsepower back in the day, that might be impressive. Like back in the 70s, one of them old 4-cylinders that made 60 or 70 horsepower back in the 70s or whatever, and that might be a good number for something like that. But yes, the quarter mile I talk about when I speak, unless I say otherwise, and sometimes I'll forget. So anyway, that's something that you guys could do, is this, right? Just take yourself a piece of sandpaper and just go by wherever you feel here, and you just smooth it out. Another thing I do also is I can take this piece of sandpaper and just go around like this here and kind of smooth the short turn out without knocking it down, without taking metal off of it. Just kind of blending it in a little bit. And another thing I do is also I try to widen the short turn on these E7s, although you probably can't tell that. They're very narrow. One of the things E7s have against it is the bowl area. I'll get it out, guys, one of these days. They're very shallow, so shape has a lot to do with flow on these. So I widen this area here, and I round it in, and you gotta be careful because you get thin areas in these, so you're limited on what you can do. But a nice transfer from the port wall into the bow area is what you're after. And I have this pretty well blended in for the most part. I'll go back over this with a sanding roll, and then I'll hit it again with this. So this is not like a one-step thing. I just give you guys little dips and dabs here as I'm doing stuff sometimes, and I don't follow up sometimes with what I'm saying. So this is not like one step, because I may do this, blend it in, and then go back over this with the sanding roll. And in some cases, if I feel something I don't like, I'll go back to a carbide bit or a grinding stone. So I spend a lot of time on these areas, feeling the bow area and dips and little craters. And you're never going to get everything out of a cast head, because if you concentrate too long on one spot, you will go through using any kind of aggressive sanding roll or a carbide bit. If you stay in one area too long, that's a bad thing. So you always want to keep moving. Just want to blend in a little bit at a time. You don't want to just keep going back and forth, and like with a carbide bit or a aggressive sanding roll, and keep going back and forth, because eventually you're going to wear that thin, and then you won't know how much material you have left. So this is a very safe way to do this, even though it's time consuming. And when you have a beautiful day like I have here, and it's kind of one of these things where it's kind of enjoyable, I'm just enjoying the fresh air, and I'm not overworking myself out here. And I get to talk to you guys for a minute. It can be a little bit enjoyable, believe it or not, as you're watching things come into shape here and getting better. Now remember, I had all this cut back. I cut the guide back pretty well on these, so I'm pretty thin in some of these spots. Some of these areas I pushed the envelope with, as we say, and what I'm trying to do here is just blend this in real nice. And it's always a little bit different in person when you look at this in real life time in your face here, than on a viewfinder. It's a little bit different. So I try to tell guys that. I've noticed on YouTube, when you try to look at certain things, it never looks the same. I watched one of my own videos a while back for a second, and I seen I had a hole in something. I think it was my intake, and I went back and looked at that thing 3 or 4 times to make sure I did not have a hole in that intake where I had ground on it before. And every time I watch the video, I'm like, that is a hole up by the stud in that intake. I gotta look at that again. I talked to my son about that the other night, and I said, you know, sometimes you show people things on YouTube, it doesn't look the same. Because the camera don't always tell you exactly the truth. That's just like anything, though. I'm sure anybody that's photographed something and they tried to show their friends, or even when you take a picture of your pet or something like that, I've noticed even when I do that, it doesn't look the same a lot of times on camera. So I'm just doing a little bit of talking as I do this. So but I hope you can see where I'm going with this here. Like I said, all we're doing is smoothing it in, getting rid of that ridge. Now, one thing you wouldn't want to do is if you got a little carried away and maybe already pushing a danger zone, where maybe you ported a pair of heads and you went up too deep maybe, and you said, wow, he's saying I need to blend that in. If you think you have problems where you already went too thin, then you don't touch it. Just leave it. Because if you go through and you hit a water jacket or something like that, you've defeated your purpose. That ridge might not be the worst thing in the world compared to ruining your head. And when you're starting out doing this stuff, even you've been doing this for years, you make things a little bit different than you want to sometimes. You'll see a casting spot and you might, I call it gnawing at it, which you should never do. But I think all guys get caught up in a minute sometimes. They'll just keep like, I see that spot, that's coming out of there. You don't want to do that. And I'm guilty of that myself. But I would rather save somebody heartache by saying these things and letting you know that that is a mistake. Sometimes we can pass information on because of what we've learned that did not work out so well for us. And if I could save somebody a little bit of trouble by just saying a couple little things, taking a minute to say it, and that's a good thing. Well, if I don't bother discussing this and then somebody tries to take their little trench and blend it in, and now they've gone through because they say, that guy said that works and that looks nice after he did that, and then you listen to what I say, you've already done the head and you have a little trench there, and now you're all worried about it, and then you wind up going through. So it's called common sense. Use common sense. So I always have to think about who's watching my video. If it's a guy that's well-rounded, that's done this stuff before, or if it's a guy that's never done this before. So guys that have already had experience know most of this stuff. So I have to try to push the information towards the guys that have never done this before, that maybe look how to port heads up on YouTube or trying to find information out. So that's who I mostly direct my information to. So anyway, that's it for this video. Just try to keep this in mind when you are cutting back a guide or using your carbide bit. Try not to make a trench in the first place if you can help it. That's the best thing I could tell you, because that way you don't have all this work to blend it in once you're finished. Now, I had these heads pretty well done before for the combination that these heads were going on, which would have been fine, because we had originally thought about even maybe redoing these later on down the road if we decided to build a motor and stuff later. My friends that has the car that these are going on, he said, well, if we ever want more done, we'll do it. But I thought about it and I said, this is a lot of work. Why just not knock these out? And then you don't have to worry about that later on. So I previously had done a lot of work to these on that mindset, and I'm thankful that he changed his mind about where we're at now before I got completely finished blending all the stuff in to the other combination. Because I had these probably 80% done. I just had to, like I'm doing here, blending things in and stuff like that. But anyway, it's best just to try to do it right the first time. And I see guys do stage 1, stage 2, 3 heads, and I'd rather just do the head for what it's according to whatever combination that's going on. So that's where I'm at with these. It was for a low compression stock base 302 with a little bit of nitrous before, and now it's going to be a blower cam vehicle. So that changed the whole thing up as far as I showed you guys on one of my videos. You guys that follow me know, combustion chamber wise, even the way I've done the shape of the port somewhat. We'll go over that more in a different video and kind of recoup some of the stuff that I've done, why I did it, and some of it I'm sure I'll forget what I did, because when you do changes like this here, it's hard to remember everything. So anyway, that's it for this video, guys. I hear a party starting next door here, and you guys don't need to hear a bunch of background noise. I want to thank you for stopping in and your interest in this, and hopefully soon we'll be doing a video with some different information on it about some intakes that I'm working on, and there's a few things I've taught myself on that lately, and things I thought about before that I had speculations but are proven now, the way the air moves through the intake. I've mentioned it a little bit in previous videos, but just a few things like that coming up. So if you like this type of stuff and you're not subscribed, hit the old subscribe button. I appreciate you new guys that are subscribing, and I appreciate you guys that's been with me forever. So thank you, and I always want to say God bless you.